On August 4th, 2023, a Cessna 172 crashed shortly after takeoff from North Perry Airport in Florida. The aircraft experienced a steep climb, exceeded the critical angle of attack, and entered into an aerodynamic stall, leading it into an uncontrolled descent from about 125 feet. The CFI front seat passenger both died during this mishap, and the rear seat passenger sustained serious injuries. The NTSB investigation revealed no pre-impact mechanical issues, and the aircraft's weight and balance were within limits. The NTSB attributed the accident to the instructor's inability to maintain control, resulting in a fatal loss of control. So in this tragedy, the NTSB suggests that the CFI made an error. As a CFI, I know that a student or person in the airplane with you can absolutely be a threat.
If somebody's locking the flight controls, you got to do something quickly. My controls. I got the airplane.
It's how we deal with those errors and how we anticipate and deal with threats that will make us all safer pilots.
I took the ATP-CTP class at Delta Airlines, and I got introduced to a CRM concept called threat and error management. In the airline world, pilots face complex and challenging situations with a lot of moving parts. Threat and error management, it's a structured way of managing those risks and staying ahead of potential problems before they happen. Threat and error management is not just for the airline pilots. It's a big, powerful tool for us general aviation pilots as well. It really encourages us to ask before every flight, what can go wrong here and how can I handle it if something does go wrong? Threat and error management is really all about spotting potential issues, which we call threats, and then handling any mistakes, known as errors, in real time to keep flights as safe as possible. It also incorporates a third concept called undesired aircraft states, which is basically, is the airplane where it should be and in the configuration it should be in? All right, first, let's take threats and let's break that down. There's three kinds of threats. First, there's anticipated threats. These are things that you know ahead of time might be happening. Let's say you're flying into an unfamiliar airport for the first time. Well, that's a potential threat. But by using this model, you can prepare for it by looking at the airport layout, checking the weather, trying to see what runway you're probably going to use, and maybe getting the radio frequencies all written down. And if something changes along your route, maybe the runway assignment changes, well, you're going to be much better prepared to handle that threat.
If you don't mind, I'd be really grateful for a like and subscribe. I appreciate it. On October 29th of 2024, a Beech Baron crashed near Arlberg, Arkansas, resulting in the fatality of the pilot on board. The aircraft, operating under Part 91, earlier that day had been undergoing an inspection for autopilot issues. Despite being warned about a frayed pitch trim cable, the pilot chose to fly after temporary repairs using safety wire were made. Shortly into that next flight, the pilot reported trim issues and declared emergency. The aircraft descended rapidly and struck trees, resulting in a total destruction of the airplane. NTSB investigators revealed compromised pitch trim functionality as a critical factor in that accident. That would be an anticipated threat. You know something could go wrong before you even take off. So what would you do in that situation? Would you take off?
Some threats or issues can come up unexpectedly. Let's say you're flying along and suddenly your GPS goes out. Well, that's something that was unexpected, but as a trained pilot, you can deal with that. To maybe tune a VOR or talk to ATC and get vectors, but use your training to deal with that unexpected threat. Now, with the unexpected threats, we classify those in two ways. Really, there's time threats and no time threats. So a time threat means, hey, you got time to come up with a plan to deal with it. An example of that might be the airport that you're going to just closed. ATC let you know there was a problem there and you got to go somewhere else. Well, it's not exactly an emergency, so you have time to figure out what's your plan and where you're going to go. A no-time threat means it's basically an emergency. Think engine failure, or there's a severe medical event on your airplane. You don't have time to mess around. You have to do something immediately. Okay, the third type of threat is a hidden or latent type of threat. Now, some threats may not be as obvious to pilots. We're talking about the psychological or physiological state of the pilot. That's something that we really have to consider. An example of that might be fatigue, chronic stress, medication, alcohol, drugs, things like that, or even hazardous attitudes or cognitive biases like get-there-itis. I did make a video about some updated hazardous attitudes and biases, and I'll link that below.
Errors, this is just what you think it is. This is where we make a mistake or mess up.
Blew through that. Yep. You got it. Get it back.
Delaware 3 X-ray Echo. Verify you're established on the approach. Looks like you're slightly north of the final.
We're headed back towards the approach, 733 X-ray Echo.
3 X-ray Echo, roger. Contact tower 124.1.
The best thing to do there is to own it, get help, use your crew, use your training, whatever you need to do to remedy that error.
The third part of the model is UAS, or undesired aircraft states.
That gives some power. There it is. There it is. There it is. Okay. Beautiful.
An example of that might be not going around after a long float down the runway, or perhaps you're not properly configured for that crosswind landing. You just don't have the airplane where it needs to be for the phase of flight that you're in. Thinking ahead, planning for those what-if scenarios, and learning from each flight so you're always improving as a pilot in the end, that's what threat and error management is all about. And if you're curious about what the ATP-CTP class looks like at Delta Airlines, I made a video of it. I'll post it here. Safe flying, everybody.